Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack your sources and notes, turning them into clear, actionable knowledge. Today, we're plunging into a book that really challenges the conventional self-help landscape, Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Mm,
For so long, we've kind of been conditioned to believe that the path to a good life involves caring about everything, right?
mm.
Relentlessly pursuing positivity, chasing endless goals. But what if the real secret is actually about caring less, or maybe caring smarter? That's what we're going to explore today.
Yeah, and what's genuinely fascinating about this book, published 2016, about 224 pages, it's got a stellar 4.5 out of 5-star rating, is that it's far from advocating apathy.
Right.
It's often described as bold, direct, and paradigm shifting, and I think it really is. This isn't about not caring at all. It's about mastering the art of selective caring. It sort of teaches you that true happiness doesn't come from just, accumulating more flex to give, but from really carefully choosing what actually deserves your limited emotional and mental energy.
Okay, so if the standard advice is to care more, Manson's whole premise pivots on this idea that you only have so many flinks to give, so give them wisely. It sounds pretty simple on the surface, but what's the real sort of sting in that tale? How does he convince us that our frank budget is often misspent?
Yeah.
And what's the tangible cost of that, in our daily lives?
That's precisely it. Manson argues quite strongly that modern culture, especially with social media and this constant positivity push, often promotes what he calls toxic positivity and these massively overinflated expectations. And this drives people into the state of constant dissatisfaction. You're chasing meaningless goals, desperately trying to avoid any discomfort, and obsessing over genuinely unimportant problems. If we zoom out, he's basically saying the cost is our authentic growth and satisfaction. He proposes that true well-being emerges when we actually embrace discomfort, when we accept our flaws, own our responsibilities, and consciously choose values that genuinely resonate with us, not just what society tells us we should value.
So just to be super clear for our listener, this isn't about becoming like a nihilist or just completely disengaging from everything.
Absolutely not. No, he's not pushing for apathy at all. He's pushing you to care deeply, really deeply, but only about what truly aligns with your chosen values. Think of your energy, your time, your mental bandwidth as these, precious resources.
Or limited resource.
Exactly. And he urges you to stop investing those resources in things like, the fleeting opinions of strangers online, or this exhausting pursuit of impossible perfection.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Or situations that are just entirely outside of your control anyway. It's really about strategic investment of your care.
Okay. One of the concepts that really jumped out at me from the book, and I think a lot of listeners will probably recognize this in their own lives, is something Manson calls the feedback loop from hell. Can you kind of walk us through how he describes that nasty little cycle? And more importantly, what practical steps does he offer to break out of it?
The feedback loop from hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a brilliant illustration, I think, of how our reaction to an emotion can be way more damaging than the emotion itself.
Okay.
So imagine feeling anxious about something. Then you start feeling guilty for being anxious.
Right.
Then maybe you feel ashamed for feeling guilty about being anxious. It's this self-perpetuating spiral. And Manson's really profound insight here is that, and this is a direct quote, the desire for more positive experience is itself a negative experience.
Wow. Okay.
So his solution isn't to fight the bad feelings. It's actually to accept them. And this acceptance, it isn't passive. It's an act of choice. It's about observing your emotions without judgment, allowing them to be, and that kind of disarms their power over you.
That makes sense.
Think about, that endless doom scrolling where you feel bad about your life, then you feel bad for feeling bad about it. Manson's pointing out that we often lock ourselves into this self-inflicted suffering.
That idea of acceptance really flips the script on how we typically deal with negative emotions, doesn't it? And speaking of counterintuitive insights, Manson takes it even further, arguing that happiness is a problem. Now, that sounds like a direct challenge to, pretty much everything we're taught about chasing joy.
It absolutely does. And it's probably one of his most important points, actually. Manson isn't saying life should be miserable, not at all. What he means is that problems are just an inevitable, non-negotiable part of being human.
Right. They're always going to be there.
Exactly. So rather than aiming for some mythical, problem-free existence, which is just an illusion, he shifts the focus entirely to the quality of your problems. Your life's quality, he argues, depends completely on the quality of the problems you choose to solve. Success isn't about the absence of challenges. It's about consistently solving better problems.
Better problems. I like that.
Yeah. And that reframe is incredibly empowering, right? It turns obstacles into actual opportunities for growth.
Okay. And building on that idea, embracing discomfort, tackling better problems, Manson hits us with another pretty challenging truth that really goes against modern self-esteem culture. You're not special.
Yeah.
Now, while that feels like a refreshing antidote to entitlement, maybe, couldn't arguing that we're average at most things inadvertently stifle ambition or, I don't know, lead to a sense of resignation.
Yeah.
How does Manson kind of counter that potential pitfall?
That's a really fair question to raise, yeah, because at first glance it can sound quite deflating. But Manson isn't advocating for resignation, not really. He's arguing that we've been fed this societal narrative that everyone is destined to be extraordinary, which paradoxically just leads to immense pressure, entitlement, envy, and then deep disappointment when, reality inevitably falls short. So his point is that accepting your averageness in most areas is actually liberating.
Liberating? How so?
Well, it frees you from that exhausting chase for unrealistic status. And it lets you channel your energy into the few areas where you can genuinely excel or, where you actively choose to make a significant difference. It's really about focusing your ambition more strategically rather than spreading it thin, trying to be amazing at everything.
That makes a lot of sense. And it ties in so well with another powerful concept he introduces, responsibility fault. It sounds like a really critical distinction. Can you maybe elaborate on that one for us?
Yeah, this one's huge. It's truly about personal power and agency. Manson makes it crystal clear. You might not be at fault for certain things that happen to you, trauma, a difficult childhood, external stuff. Those are past events.
Right. Things out of your control.
Exactly. But you are unequivocally responsible for your response, for what you do next. As he puts it so crisply, fault is past tense. Responsibility is present tense. And this isn't about blaming the victim, not at all. It's about empowering them. No one else is coming to fix your life or solve your problems. That fundamental understanding, that's your job. And it's a profound call to action for self-reliance, for taking ownership of your future, basically.
And as we talk about growth and taking ownership, Manson also touches on how we actually learn, saying certainty is the enemy of growth. So what does this imply for how we should approach our own beliefs and assumptions?
It's a really profound statement about intellectual humility. When you cling too tightly to your beliefs, when you're absolutely certain you're right about everything, you just stop learning. You stop growing.
You close yourself off.
Completely. Growth inherently requires you to question your deeply held assumptions, to be open to admitting mistakes, and crucially, to be willing to update your worldview based on new evidence or experience. He really encourages a mindset of skepticism, healthy skepticism, relentless curiosity, and yeah, that willingness to be wrong sometimes.
That's vital.
And it isn't just about intellectual development. It's essential for personal evolution, for adapting in a world that's constantly changing around us.
And finally, a very sobering point, but I think ultimately a clarifying one that Manson uses to bring everything into sharp focus. Death is the ultimate clarifier. How does confronting our own mortality actually help us filter out the noise and prioritize what really matters?
Well, it's the ultimate perspective shift, isn't it? The awareness of your own finite time, your inevitable death. It just acts as this incredibly powerful lens. It immediately strips away the trivial stuff, the meaningless worries, the things we endlessly stress about that truly, honestly don't matter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, it puts things in perspective.
Totally. And Manson's closing thought, you are going to die someday, and that's what makes life valuable. It's not meant to be morbid. It's actually a profound call to action, to prioritize your values, live authentically, and invest your limited flex in what truly defines a meaningful existence for you.
It's a motivator.
Exactly, a motivator to live now.
This definitely isn't your typical believe yourself in Journal in a Meadow kind of self-help book, is it?
Oh, no, definitely not.
So what, in your view, are its real standout strengths?
Well, I think its primary strength really lies in its raw, unfiltered honesty. Manson's voice is genuinely funny sometimes, refreshingly direct, and just brutally honest. He weaves in personal stories and modern analogies that really resonate, I think, with a contemporary audience.
Yeah, it feels very current.
It does. And it's such a powerful antidote to the often, saccharine or kind of fluffy self-help advice that's out there. Plus, its strong emphasis on personal values, on figuring out what genuinely matters to you, rather than chasing external metrics like fame or money, that provides a much-needed grounding in a world that often pushes us towards superficiality.
Fair point. But like any influential work, there are always going to be critics, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the common criticisms or perceived weaknesses people bring up about the book?
Sure. Well, for one, some readers do find it can be a bit repetitive. They feel the core message, maybe could have been delivered more concisely, perhaps in fewer chapters. Secondly, the explicit language and that very raw tone, while definitely a strength for many people, can be a significant turnoff for more sensitive readers. It's absolutely not for everyone in that respect.
Right, the swearing is pretty constant.
It is. And finally, some people just find Manson's cynical tone a little off-putting. It depends on your personal taste and, I guess, how you prefer your self-help delivered.
So putting it all together, who is this book really for? If someone's listening right now and wondering, should I pick this up? Who's the ideal reader for The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck?
Well, it really seems to resonate strongly with millennials, Gen Z creators, and pretty much anyone who's inherently skeptical of traditional self-help advice.
The self-help skeptics.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's almost like a lifeline for people burned out by toxic positivity or feeling overwhelmed by hustle culture. Or, those who find themselves constantly people-pleasing, feeling swamped, maybe struggling with low self-worth. Manson's writing is often described as that necessary punch in the face.
Yeah.
For those drowning in overthinking or just caring way too much about things that simply don't matter. It's blunt, yes, sometimes uncomfortable, but for many, it's exactly the blunt medicine they need for clarity, for self-respect, and for finally prioritizing their own well-being. After all, as Manson himself says, you can't be an important and life-changing presence for some people without also being a joke and an embarrassment to others.
That's a great quote.
It is, and the ultimate takeaway, really. The key to a good life is not giving a feck about more. It's giving a feck about less. That really sums it up.
We've truly taken a deep dive into Mark Manson's provocative book today, unpacking his pretty counterintuitive advice to live a good life not by caring more, but by caring better. From understanding that insidious feedback loop from hell to the kind of liberating idea that you're not special and even confronting our own mortality, it's definitely a lot to consider, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I think the book's ultimate message, which is just beautifully encapsulated in one of its really powerful quotes, is who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for. It's not about avoiding problems, right? It's about choosing which problems actually define your life. So that raises a really important question for you, our listener. If you only have so many full-licks to give, what problem are you genuinely willing to struggle for today? And maybe just as importantly, what can you finally intentionally just let go of?
Something profound to chew on there. Until next time, keep digging deeper.